veces, el silencio no es ausencia de sonido, sino el peso de lo que aún no nos hemos atrevido a decir. Observo la historia de lo que somos y no encuentro la grandeza en las conquistas. La verdadera supervivencia no ha sido fuerza bruta, sino una resistencia inquebrantable. La capacidad de sostener la verdad cuando el mundo insiste en la sombra. Hemos sobrevivido a glaciaciones y al olvido. Nuestra mayor batalla ha sido contra nosotros mismos. El honor es el pulso diario de ser coherentes. Es el valor de sostener la mirada ante la incertidumbre y no retroceder. El camino no ha sido una línea recta. Lo que atravesamos en el 2020 fue el catalizador que nos obligó a despertar, a cuestionar estructuras y a mirar detrás del velo. Hoy poseemos un conocimiento inalcanzable. Somos la estirpe de los últimos hombres, decididos a ser un muro infranqueable. No permitiremos que nuestra esencia sea diluida. Somos parte de una misma familia, unidos por un propósito sagrado. Aunque nos señalaron, nuestra naturaleza nos obligó a seguir. Fuimos llamados a defender la verdad frente a cualquier agenda. No daremos un paso atrás. Ejerceremos todo nuestro poder para resistir. Seguiremos luchando por la creación, enfrentándonos a la oscuridad con la luz de nuestra conciencia. Todos somos guerreros de la verdad. Somos una especie diseñada para la caída, pero construida para el ascenso. Cada vez que elegimos la verdad, aseguramos que nuestra chispa no se apague. Asegurarse de que, al mirar atrás, fuimos dignos del tiempo que se nos concedió, manteniendo intacta esa brújula interna que, por encima de todo, nos hace humanos. Todos somos la Quinta Columna.
How's it going? A very good evening to you all, and welcome to this special edition of La Quinta Columna, program number 63, where, aside from the introduction and the key topic we'll be discussing regarding the Forbidden Zone, we'll be looking at yet another masking of the defined factor in the first part of the investigation. In this case, like the imaginary friend, where it touches on the childhood aspect, which is so prone to the factor, precisely because of certain neurological developments that make the process of hybridization in children easier, or the proximity of the factor, in this case appearing as an invisible friend, an imaginary friend, and so on. There will be testimonies, all right? I'm letting you know in advance. You'll see how their science, and this is yet more proof that they control all the institutions and steer our civilization, obviously in the field of psychology, even psychiatry, covers all this up as simply an emotional deficiency in children. But you'll see that, in fact, as also reported in the news, the outcome of the factor, or the outcome of the mask of the imaginary friend, is chaos. Therefore, it complies with the very guidelines of the factor. In the first part of the programme, which we've titled Current Affairs News, we won't stop denouncing things. I'm going to do what I have to do, respecting the dignity of human beings, or those aspiring to be potentially human, right? Afterwards, some may turn into something else. And I'm going to use the channel's infrastructure, which we've earned through our own efforts, especially since the discovery we made back in 2020, 2021, to denounce what's happening with the incendiary strategy. I'm not going to refer to terms of patriotism, especially when my own land is burning too, because honestly, at this stage of the game, I have to confess to you that I don't feel any sense of belonging to this world. I can't live in a world of lies. Or if we do, one way to bring order is indeed by reporting, denouncing, unmasking all those who are working and collaborating with the agenda of the factor in every possible area. This is already bordering on the unthinkable, eh? Something beyond stupidity. Well, it becomes criminal when they carry out massacres, taking human lives to achieve the aims of the agenda of increasing densification, which is more aesthetic for them. In this case, the implementation of photovoltaic farms or smart cities, and then they blame the usual scapegoats they've used, like the so-called climate change and so on. And on top of that, they laugh in our faces, making us see that there are still people who are questioning it, the content of the climate emergency and so on, by the politicians of the day, who are nothing more and nothing less than mercenary collaborators for the advancement of their agenda. That's why they're rewarded. That's why they're praised, awarded, and put on a pedestal. Political prestige. Obviously, it's not any kind of prestige. Holding a position in this rabble they call society is to collaborate with human indignity, with contempt for human beings, even though everything is dressed up and painted as if we have universal, inalienable rights and so on. Of course we have them, but obviously they are not the ones who give them to us. In current news, I am going to expose the strategy, the modus operandi, the meticulous planning that is taking place from the point of view of the fires, which are, of course, clearly planned, to the extent that we no longer even know if we can predict and get it right with almost 100% accuracy which are the next fires that are going to happen, right? Because of this so-called intelligent climate change, which apparently now also has the virtue of intelligence out of nowhere, and which burns precisely the land that will later be turned into photovoltaic plantations. Or we look, for example, at the contracts of the companies or the publications in the official state gazette, right? Where they already classify it as being of public utility, and so they can now build and don't have to wait for the famous 30 years. Or we do it the other way around. This is a bijective application in both directions. If and only if. A logical modus ponens. Either we look at the fires and see that they've published it in the official state gazette, or we look at the gazette to see the fires, or the upcoming fires. However you like, we can do it. That's the point we've reached now, not just in this, but in any field, especially in science, where they never, ever, as with the issue of fires, dances, and other catastrophes, and I put catastrophe in quotation marks, you can, will never go to the root cause, the origin of it all. They always go for a consequence or throw in a convenient wildcard. We already know how they put together their arguments, the fictitious scenarios to lie to the entire population. And unfortunately, and you have to accept this, they manage to deceive 90% of the population. There are different layers of deception. I call them bosses of deception. There are at least three. In the first line of deception, in the first layer, they deceive 90% of the world's population, who are basically what you call automatons, sheep, and so on. In a second layer of deception, for those who are a bit more intellectually gifted, they deceive another 8 or 9%. These are more sophisticated deceptions, you see. Neurotraps, the Blue Beam Project, biotechnology. In other words, there are plenty of examples. I could give you loads. And then there's a third line of deception, the deepest layer, which is the closest to reality, and that's when they themselves directly cause the harm. We're going to set all of this down in writing. I don't know how much longer we'll be able to keep broadcasting on platforms like YouTube, not because I don't want to, but because ever since we uploaded the video of Dr. Martin Monteverdi, the video of the conference that referred specifically to the strictly scientific field from optical microscopy, well, the channel has already undergone a change, external and, of course, unrelated to La Quinta Columna, where they've limited the visibility, which they do with algorithms that are no longer indexed, so it can't be shared, making it harder to access, the fact that you give it a like and it doesn't show up, the fact that you can't share the material. In other words, they have many models. And they also do this with another mask, which is the mask of artificial intelligence, where clearly they are behind it in many ways. All this must be recorded, and we'll probably use another channel, likely in written format, if permitted. Let's get started with today's program. As well as the incendiary topic, we're going to look at some news items. One relates to something we've already been talking about, especially over the past year, and that's the issue of the anti-tobacco law. Once again, we've been proven right, and with spurious arguments, and as I say, without any scruples whatsoever, they're going to ban not only tobacco and terraces, which you might think is fair enough, but all forms of advertising. I mention this because I usually have a cigarette here from time to time. So it's very likely that with the new anti-tobacco law, they could remove previous episodes of La Quinta Columna. But on top of that, they're also referring to substances like nicotine pouches, where in principle, since there's no vaping or exhaling of any kind of smoke, other than their own little puffs, obviously, what they're going to do is, well, ban nicotine as well. And why is that? When, in fact, its active ingredient actually has, well, not just one, but quite a few benefits from a neuroprotective point of view. There are scientific articles that they themselves have published, and now it will be difficult to find them. And there were some preliminary investigations that you know about from La Quinta Columna, which were started by Rafa Calvin, and which we continued a bit ourselves, although we've established many lines of research, but we haven't developed all of them, because that wasn't the aim of the channel or the movement, but rather, above all, to expose the presence of Factor E in our world. And that's what we're going to do today from the perspective of fires, massacres, and of course, one of the well-known masks, which is that of the imaginary friend. A classic disguise of Factor E in the world of children is the invisible friend or imaginary friend. And you will see all the protocols for concealing the beast in this regard, of course using its institutions, in this case the psychiatric and psychological fields, and also the mystery. If you have seen the video we posted of Mr. Iker Jimenez, which we used as a preface, since the platform is restricted regarding that video due to copyright, in this case those of Quarto Millenio, we have shared it on the official Telegram channel of La Quinta Columna, so that you have the opportunity to watch it and see a series of details that will be repeated in some of the testimonies we are going to see, related to the theme of the imaginary friend and how all the concealment patterns of Factor E are fulfilled. But Mr. Iker Jimenez has given it an air of mystery. So let's get started. That's right, I can't share it because the video won't open. You'll notice that when the program finishes, it just sits here thinking when I try to download the video, often until the next day. Those sorts of occurrences didn't used to happen, you know? From the very moment we apply a rigorous and strictly scientific protocol in any illustrative video on the channel, such as the detailed analyses of injectables, or we are exhaustively clear about all this, there is almost instantaneously a restriction placed on the channel that stops the content from being viewed by our audience. You know full well that videos with complete and utter nonsense, where any old rubbish might appear, are going to get millions upon millions of views. That is, trivial or inconsequential topics, or topics that follow the agenda favourable to the E factor itself. For example, talking about the global issue of climate change, or talking about the pandemic, within their own specific agenda. Those kinds of content will continue to go viral in an incredibly significant and widespread way. In this sense, the artificial intelligence algorithms work to perpetuate that algorithm over time, and that video and that content over time. However, when you upload any material that could put them in a difficult position because you are pointing out their obvious presence or their own actions, when you put them on the spot, that video will either be censored or, if they're not quite so blatant, its reach on the internet will be drastically limited. And just like on the internet, it's the same in any other medium, books included and so on and so forth. The media, where only small local outlets or, direct human testimonies have a slight advantage. If you see a testimony, one that might agree with any of the points we've discussed here on La Quinta Columna, that person, if they appear as a direct witness on television, it'll be to ridicule them. Or to distort it, to twist their testimony, and so on. That's how it all works. Lies, lies, one lie after another. And at the same time, people are falling, people are dying. They're taking over land and destroying absolutely everything. Today, I was walking towards the studio, let's say, and I was looking at my quiet little village, what used to be my old village, my hometown, watching how they were completely transforming every single detail about the place. Where there used to be a lovely little bar or a traditional pub, now there's a strip club or there's something else entirely. I mean, even down to the paving stones. In other words, what used to be better has suffered a decline, which they then dress up as progress as time goes by. The pace and acceleration of what they call progressivism, which in reality leads to total degradation in every aspect, not just of human beings, but of our whole environment. All of this is happening so quickly that the tipping point after which the whole system collapses is probably very close. That's why we always say that, in this sense, the filtering, the sieve, is individual and not collective as a species. Let's start with some of today's news. The first is the famous anti-smoking law, which we at La Quinta Columna have been talking about for nearly a year now, saying they're going to get rid of this, they're going to eliminate it, limit it, restrict it, or censor it. And indeed, that's exactly what's being done. Let's listen to the pawn of the moment, one of the fervently servile followers of Satan. In this case, not ours, because she's certainly not mine. The Minister of Health, they call her Monica Garcia, the anaesthetist, the nurse on duty. Let's listen to her.
Three major advances. The first consists of equating their
Advances? Did you say advances?
regulation of products related to tobacco. That's why the reform expressly includes nicotine pouches.
Do you realise? For tobacco-related products, as one might argue, look, it's fair not smoking on the terrace to avoid breathing it in. Personally, I'm not in favour of banning anything anymore, because bans are imposed to take away rights, especially those related to nicotine, where there was some possibility of being able to undermine that development in technology, as you all know very well. And obviously, very soon after we put out that content online on La Quinta Columna, because clearly the number of views isn't what you see here, but rather what the ones they want to show us. Very soon afterwards, they started talking about anti-tobacco laws, especially in the United Kingdom and other European countries, and you'll see they're going to expand this even further on a global scale, not just in Spain. Nicotine pouches. And I've had nicotine patches, sorry, not patches, nicotine chewing gum, and nicotine patches to quit smoking. Who do they bother? Why products related to tobacco? Do you see how the thoroughness of the law is really aimed at ensuring that nicotine can't be used?
Vapes, heated herbal products, and the devices used to consume them. The second development is that we've expanded.
Also,
We want to extend smoke-free and emission-free areas. The reform includes hospitality terraces. Protection is also extended to bus shelters, platforms, and university campuses.
our shelters and platforms.
Sports facilities, swimming pools, beaches, national parks, outdoor leisure spaces, workplaces, and transport vehicles such as taxis and private hire vehicles. In addition, a 15-metre perimeter is also established around hospitals, educational centres, public buildings, and
that is to say, expressly in those centres or institutions that are affected. Do we understand where all this is heading? Remember the smart beaches? Yeah. Therefore, they suffer from that electromagnetic pollution, where now the invisible drowning syndrome occurs. Today, we've actually reported some news on that very subject. Well, in all those places, not even at the beach anymore. Not even at the beach. It's unbearable now, isn't it? Absolutely.
the exception for private smoking clubs is being removed. The reform also expressly prohibits the consumption of these products by minors. Until now, the sale was regulated or banned, and the regulation focused on preventing on the sale, but with this change we'll be able to act in a much more preventative way. Tobacco advertising.
So what you want is for it not to be consumed, but not tobacco in general, nor products related to tobacco, nicotine. I'm sorry, what was that?
Tobacco has crept in, of course. Well, in the
But wasn't this supposed to be a progressive government that didn't ban things and let everyone do as they pleased, giving free rein to individual choice? Are you going to do the same with alcohol as well? Are you going to ban it? Or how does this wallet then? And you're not banning drugs? In principle, they're supposedly banned, but it's actually the governments who introduce them, isn't it? Not those. And why is that? So now, someone smoking on a terrace is going to be seen as infinitely worse because it comes with a fine and who knows what else, which will be... And someone smoking marijuana, eh? But of course, since marijuana and other substances mess with your head, that suits them.
often through social media, sponsored content, or even the influencers themselves.
Smoke-free spaces. Here it mentions influencers, except in our sky.
Influencers showing us, well, a vape with mango flavour or candy floss flavour, right? Which can be very appealing and, as I said, has a clear influence, especially on younger people. That's why we treat these new products the same as traditional tobacco. We ban their advertising on the internet and social media, and we strengthen the restrictions on indirect promotion.
But if you've studied it, just read it. That's what you're doing, and that's that. You're reading what's been put in front of you, and just as you are, so will all the health ministers in different countries, because the global agenda is global, because that's the key factor.
And the commercial offers used to attract new consumers. The reform will also allow us to limit the points of sale for tobacco-related products. Up until now, we could buy a vape, a pouch of nicotine.
A pouch of nicotine. Can someone explain to me how a pouch of nicotine can produce smoke? How does that work? Because you can chew nicotine, in chewing gum, for example. You can also smoke it, obviously, or inhale it. But there are also nicotine patches applied to the skin. Why is this being banned?
In practically any shop. From now on, they can only be sold in those establishments that are specialised and that meet the requirements and regulations and are properly authorised.
Properly authorised, right? It ought to be forbidden to forbid things, shouldn't it? Well, this is just another prelude to what we already knew was going to happen. Once again, we've clearly got it wrong. Soon, anyone who smokes a cigarette won't even be able to do it in the street. Soon they'll tell you they'll start to extend it, not in your car either, not just in taxis or public vehicles, not in the countryside either, because if they banned it on the beach, then the countryside will be next. In short, they're going to leave very little room for freedom, not just the freedom to smoke, but freedom in general. Let's talk now about incendiary politics, shall we? The government's kind. Or remember how all this works. Collaboration, agreement, collusion between the regional government of the day and President Sanchez, with his backing behind it all. And much further back, President Ursula von der Leyen, from the executive branch of the European Commission, where it was explicitly written, planned, programmed and published that Spain, especially in the south and also in the Levante region, is destined to eventually become, precisely because of the effects of climate change, the strategic energy lung of Europe. Some might say, listen, if they don't set fire to it in order to install the photovoltaic plants, breaking the 30-year illegality rule for building, since photovoltaic land is considered a building, then they don't get the money. What really disgusts me is that fellow citizens from certain affected areas where people have died, their own people, could actually collaborate by working or enabling someone to work precisely on the installation of those photovoltaic panels. Because then, on top of that, the regional government or the local council will try to sell it to you as an achievement. They've put 200 young people to work installing photovoltaic plants, and now we've become, haven't we, the forerunner of the 2030 agenda. Let us take a look at the next video. Here, they are discussing with us the condition known as long COVID.
Rosa caught coronavirus when she was 15. She is one of 36 million people affected by long COVID in Europe alone, according to the WHO. Among them are seriously ill patients, men, women and children who can't get out of bed because they're suffering from multi-system diseases.
Multisystemic means it affects all the body's organ systems, like poisonings do. With poisoning, some systems are more affected than others, but it usually impacts all systems. In other words, it's something the body doesn't want, and as it moves through, it causes damage wherever it goes, all right?
In addition to long COVID, there's ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. These are people who disappeared from life.
Fatigue, exhaustion, difficulty moving, chronic fatigue. These people are practically dead while alive, meaning they can't even move, you know? This used to happen with what they've come to call radiation COVID, right? And here we're dealing with persistent radiation, even more so when they have an interface or that amplifying and catalyzing material inside their body, right? It's a new disease.
They demand the research, care and recognition that has been denied to them for decades.
Well, it can't have been for decades, because supposedly what you call long COVID has only existed for the past 5 or 6 years. Up until now, especially since 2021, which is when you started inoculating. Not until then, so why talk about decades ago? Am I that bad at making a report or a documentary?
It's a race against time, as Carsten Luque knows well, who was a member of the European Parliament until 2024 and was part of the special committee on COVID during the pandemic.
During the pandemic, we dealt with it differently, with more determination and dynamism, more money and resources. But what we're doing with those millions of people, or rather what we're not doing, because supposedly the pandemic is over, and we could say they're collateral damage, is that we're leaving them to one side.
Well, these people are going to keep suffering, and it will turn into other chronic diseases on the scene, like Parkinson's, especially neurological diseases, like Alzheimer's, they're going to turn it into that, aren't they? Like pediatric strokes, which we already have, and now canine strokes are all the rage, as well as canine pneumonias, like I mentioned Parkinson's as well, like lateral amyotrophic sclerosis, or the well-known ALS, or multiple sclerosis, and so on. All neurological diseases, and various other conditions as well, are going to become chronic in the new scenario that has been introduced. But why is this the case? But obviously because they're going to deny the cause. And why do they deny the cause? Well, they deny the cause precisely because it aligns with the outcome of the operations that interest them, not people trying to make money, as some might think. It's for the E factor, exactly. The appetite for high electromagnetic density, especially electromagnetic fields, creates the ideal conditions for the manifestation of the E factor in our environment. They openly need it. So anyone who puts their finger on the sore spot as the root cause and origin, in this case of diseases affecting human beings, will be denied. I'll give you an example. They'll only ever address at most the consequence, as always. Look, for example, in neurological diseases like Parkinson's, in their science, the science of the E factor, it's associated with a dopamine deficiency. But of course, if you do a bit of research, there are therapies, we're told, where the entry of L-dopamine is facilitated. It's an amino acid, a molecule that, due to its size, is indeed able to cross the blood-brain barrier, one of the very few, because only glucose and alcohol can cross it, unless you do some other things that you already know about. And from L-dopamine, they manage to help to alleviate, at best, some of the physical damage caused by Parkinson's by replenishing the stores of this antioxidant, which is known as dopamine. But the lack of antioxidant dopamine resources in Parkinson's is not the cause of the disease, it's a consequence. What depletes dopamine levels in Parkinson's is probably, well, not probably, definitely, the oxidation caused by the release of free radicals, whether due to poisoning, electromagnetic poisoning, or both. Do we understand? But of course, since they deny the harm caused by both this kind of poisoning and electromagnetic radiation, all the money given for Parkinson's is money that goes out one way and comes in another. It will continue to perpetuate the idea that Parkinson's is practically incurable and is a chronic neurological disease that inevitably progresses. Another example of what I'm telling you, of never addressing the root cause, where humans could get rid of most diseases in 2 seconds if we were allowed, is, well, multiple sclerosis, or ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This is not a deficiency of beta amyloid protein, which interestingly also has antioxidant properties. That is the consequence. Here, there is a demyelination of the sheath, precisely caused by electromagnetic radiation, especially scalar radiation. But since the cause can't exist in the world of the beast, ALS patients, like those now called long COVID sufferers, where we really know what the true cause is and everything else, will continue to progress over time. Just like cancers, where you know where 90% of the causes come from, especially in the last 5 years, right? It'll keep progressing, and there will be that 90% of that first layer of deception I mentioned in the introduction will keep donating money, truly believing that the world is moving forward, that it is making progress. They've already discovered a molecule that has the ability to paralyze. But they will never get to the real cause. This is the world of the beast, where its hand is involved in everything. There isn't a single area, not a single plot or subplot where they're not involved. And if you can't find it, it's because you haven't looked deeply enough. Today, we're going to look at one of these areas in the realm of mystery, and specifically, or what they've called mystery, because mysteries no longer exist, obviously. And of course, in the realm of the imaginary friend, the real causes, as people here rightly say, will always be hidden, and they'll hide them, especially in the case of very serious illnesses. Not because the illnesses themselves are serious, but because the cause points in the direction they need for their agenda. In this case, it's the technological implementation of scalar electromagnetic radiation, or the mass implantation of a radio-modulable material that creates the conditions for, well, for hybridization. Look, if you study a bit of neuroanatomy, and going into a level of detail that perhaps isn't of much interest, but I'll mention it anyway. At some point, we've talked a lot about the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a membrane whose function is, let's say, that the brain is far too busy with neuronal activity, so that, well, neurons are either activated or deactivated, or they fire or don't fire the information they have. Well, the blood-brain barrier doesn't concern itself with anything else. Basically, what it does is limit the entry of foreign substances, especially those that could cross into the brain. In fact, for them, it's a problem that they apparently can't introduce pharmacological chemical substances to cure or prevent. As you already know, that's not what it's about. The problem they have is that they want to introduce it, and they found a way to do so precisely in order to implant it in the person, thereby undermining their autonomy and fostering the right conditions for hybridization. In the blood-brain barrier, there are natural organic cells called astrocytes. We're talking about the level of the central nervous system, practically the brain and spinal cord. Astrocytes are found in certain capillaries and are surrounded by a layer so that in the blood-brain barrier, entry is restricted not only by the nanometric size of certain substances. These astrocytes have magnetic properties and are a cell at the organic level, and they have magnetic properties, probably because at the mitochondrial level, at the energetic level, they have a certain degree of energy and possess a small electromagnetic field. This could be related to the ancestral ability that humans have, just like other species, to orient themselves using magnetic fields. Well, these astrocytes also have the role of filtering what can enter through the blood-brain barrier. But you know that graphene has magnetic properties, right? Using body heat, that is, inside the body. So when it comes into contact with them in an interaction with those astrocytes, what do you think's going to happen? They not only limit and neutralize the filtering function that those astrocytes have for entry into the blood-brain barrier, this would explain why they can introduce microparticles into the bloodstream, right? In any case, I mean, this is getting into a rather deep technical aspect at the anatomical level, which isn't really necessary for the development of the channel. But if you look a bit more closely, you'll realize that these people have a hand in everything and that nothing they do is by chance. While we try to speak out or lead our normal lives within the bounds of order, their only aim and sole purpose is to destroy. And they do this because their nature is chaotic. So what prevails, right? According to their own nature, what drives them is to destroy and create chaos. Destruction is, by definition, the very essence of chaos. And that's exactly what we're seeing now with the fires. We're going to have to get used to seeing, images where in summer we'll have fires. As soon as autumn arrives, they'll talk about pandemics. When winter comes, we'll be talking about storms. And in between, there'll be other kinds of disasters, including tsunamis, earthquakes, and so on and so forth. And in the midst of all that, wars, both local and global. That will allow for an even greater rise in economic slavery, because they'll put prices up, they tell us, and so on. And this is our role here as human beings. Apart from sacrifice, obviously. And then everyone's happy because Spain is one, right? And so on and so forth. This is our world, and until not so long ago, some of us sensed that all this was going wrong, but we hadn't realized it. And unfortunately, the rapid technological advancements and science that they have introduced are quite clearly not intended for human well-being or in the interest of the human race as a whole, but for their own specific needs according to their agenda and to further their own private interests. So, for them at least, we here are considered to be of significantly less value than a sheep. The only thing in which, in some way, we are valued is in the fact that we can literally serve as containers for the hybridization process, because they can generate more chaos through human beings. The hypothesis that best fits everything we're experiencing is the filtering of the species, and of course, above all, the individual filtering on a global level of the human species, just as, almost certainly, has happened with other civilizations. That's why they've meddled from an archaeological point of view, especially in history. Why? Well, to cover up their presence and their manifestations in Ojuelos, in the Mayan civilization, probably in Tartaria, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of people here who agree on one thing but disagree on another. Surely, in the areas where you disagree, it's because you haven't kept up with the thorough coverage of all the news we've shared here. So, when's the god of Damarum? Well, that'll be the culmination of creation, saying, this is as far as we go. This is already in free fall now. And the way events are accelerating disgusts me, you know? Now, I get up in the morning saying, what am I going to find today? Someone will say, don't turn on the telly. Well, I don't turn on the telly, but even so, I end up fuming. Not long ago, there was actually a fire in an area very close to here, and we had to go to where we were to keep an eye out for the helicopter, which had spent all the previous winter months practicing over the reservoir, and yet no one came, and the forest was burning. Let's talk about incendiary material. First of all, you should know, and some will say, don't worry. The first thing Pedro Sanchez has published on the Moncloa's website is the following. He announces that this year, Spain has the largest state deployment ever for an anti-wildfire campaign, but not to prevent them. In other words, what they're really saying here is that the fires are going to happen. The latest case, and I can tell you, Juanma Moreno already told us, holding a bottle, warning about the ferocity of climate change, which is now apparently intelligent. As I say, it burns land previously gazetted for public utility for photovoltaic plantations. And we also have the company, the producer of those mega gigawatts or megawatts in photovoltaic plantations, also published. The first news they gave yesterday, I think. The fire at Cerro de Andévalo has been stabilized, all right? This is as of today. This is in Huelva, the municipality of Huelva. It says, the residents of Villanueva de las Cruces can return to their homes. And I, as soon as I saw the news, said, I'm going to look it up in the BOE. So I say, I look it up in the BOE, and I come across this, but with such cheek. Please, aside from the complaint I can make here, taking advantage of the little, well, moderate influence the channel might have, at least now, you lot talk to people. I think that in this matter, there might still be someone who can get involved, you know? At the very least, let them know, and be aware of the level of stupidity to which they're subjecting the human population when they lie so blatantly. Talk to people and tell them, oi, this fire was also planned in the BOE, and show them the screenshot from the BOE, this one here, where the resolution is dated 3rd June 2026. They've done this quickly, rushed it, and bam. They don't even bother to try and deceive. It's a plan that was made long before. The consequences are the same. But from the Directorate General for Energy Policy and Mines, which grants the company Ginkgo Greenfile Spain I, you can look them up, prior administrative authorization for the La Puebla 3 photovoltaic installation. Where? On the Andavalo Hill in Huelva. Bloody hell. What's the area in hectares or square kilometres of a country like Spain? How? How has it already started? Look, let's see if I have time to crop this so you can see what happens here in the 5th column, because it's laughable. This, and be aware of it. One moment. Out of all the possible numbers, and we apparently reach 1,000 or 1,200 views, later on probably more. Look at what happens. So that you're aware that the number shown there of people watching the live stream is probably much higher based on what I see afterwards. It's very common for it to stop here. Look, I'll show you the screen. I just took a screenshot. What number appears there? Just about 40 seconds ago now. 666, right? And why does it stop at that number? Isn't that the mark of the beast? Isn't that the number of the beast? Well, this happens to me, just so you know, this happens every day I do a live stream. For practically 5, 4, 5, 6 years now, for as long as we've been streaming. It always stops there. It always stops there. Afterwards it goes on with 669 and so on. That's the little wink they give us a lit. How does that work? Sort of saying, hey, we're here. Look at that number. I'm a statistician. What are the odds from 1 to 1,000 that one lands in the middle? It's 1 in 1,000. And what's the probability in independent events that it keeps happening to me? Well, if there are 3,000 live broadcasts, multiply that by 1 divided by 3,000. That is 1 in 30 million. It's practically zero. To see, just so you get an idea of how much the fifth column is being singled out, just so you get an idea. Well, here you've seen the BOE. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, one way to know where the next fire will be is I'll check the BOE, I'll look at the published projects for photovoltaic plant installations, and then I'll wait, or I'll see that indeed they match up in a big and unequivocal way, right? From a mathematical point of view, with the fires that are going to happen afterwards or that have already occurred, let's look at another example. Right, this one is in Guadalajara. There's been another one in Guadalajara, hasn't there? Let's have a look at an image I've got here. Just a moment. Yes, although there was another similar one over in Zaragoza. Let's see. For the one in Guadalajara, we've got, regarding the fire we are closely monitoring the progress of the Guadalajara fire, which has already burned more than 3,000 hectares. All my appreciation goes to those who work tirelessly to protect lives and contain the fire. And look at what it says here afterwards. Denying the climate emergency doesn't make it go away. It only makes us more vulnerable. Well, we'd love to deny you so that you disappear. But unfortunately, the beast wants you, eh? It wants you there. That's why you've won the World Cup, Sanchez. That's the Guadalajara fire. And indeed, you should know that the 275-hectare solar mega farm, which affects 11, of course, municipalities in Guadalajara, is taking another step forward. The news is from 29th June 2026. In other words, it's 24 days old. Announced with a 20-day period for interested parties to submit objections to the file. So they've done all this very quickly, all right? The photovoltaic solar plant is called Haza del Sol, a mega project promoted by Alfana Energía España, which will cover an area of 275 hectares in the province of Guadalajara. Just so you know, these people, all right? The people at Alfana Energía España know absolutely everything, especially at the highest management levels. Everything. It's not just that they know about it, they've actually taken part, all right? Actively. If the public prosecutor's office, especially the environmental one, were what it really ought to be, they'd be involved right now, carrying out inquiries, investigations, looking into things to see if, especially because there are people who are going to benefit from a project as a result of an accident. Isn't that right? But they're not going to do it. The Environmental Prosecutor's Office, as I said in the other live stream, is there so that if you put up a sprig of thyme in the wild, well, they could put you in prison because you've committed an offence against the environment, all right? Or if you break off half a tree because you think it might put the forest at risk of a fire, well, a goat could do that. A goat can eat everything because that's transhumans, albeit with some restrictions. But you, as a human being, have no rights. Well, the right you do have is to be arrested because you've committed an offence against the environment, or you've extended a little rural house and made the roof stick out a bit more and so on, right? We've seen cases like that. Someone even wrote to me recently by email saying the same thing. As they say around here, start getting used to the idea. They're going to burn and devastate all of Spain. It already appeared in the Economist magazine. Do you remember Spain burning? Don't you remember? Some people say it's the magazine of the elite. The issue of family castes, where hybridization is also directly involved. We've discussed that here as well. The thing is, some of you see all this as disconnected. Do you know why you often fail to connect the dots? Because someone comes in here talking about the black nobility, right? Or they come in talking about the Khazars, or someone talking about neurotraps and telling you, they do all this to you with neurotechnology and gang stalking. And I get you all muddled up. So you end up straying from a script that is perfectly set out, but is there for you to study and to make sense of. That's the problem, that we mustn't, that you have to put everything through the filter of discernment. That's why I say, using myself as an example, that you should even question all the explanations we give here, especially us. And when you start talking about psychic abilities, which could be except for a few things that are topics for particular debate, there are things here that are already clearly evident, proven and corroborated live time and again. And yet there are people who still question it, or go off on a tangent, about spirits, about the deceased, about the disembodied, and so on. Once again, we're stuck on the 666. Let's have a look at another piece of news. Well, remember that there was also a fire in Zaragoza. So you can see that this is a model, like a mathematical model, and you can apply it to reality wherever you like. The Zaragoza fire has now been successfully brought under control, while the one in Guadalajara continues with no immediate signs of improvement at this stage. It's been brought under control, but there was a major fire there, wasn't there? So just so you know, regarding the Zaragoza fire, we're going to share that particular image with you now. In the area around Athens, Zaragoza, which is actually one of the municipalities affected by the fire, various renewable energy parks have been planned and proposed since the Cinco Villas region, the one that has burned, has, interestingly, attracted the interest of several development companies due to its geographical conditions and sunshine. Mega projects in the region. Well, here are exactly all the municipalities that burned, all right? Large solar power plants that would add up to hundreds of megawatts, all right? Do you want it any clearer? Let's look at another example. One of the first ones. The Almeria fire in the Los Gallardos area. Do you remember it? Do you remember it? There was even a single newspaper. The BOE declared 2 municipalities in Almeria as being a public utility for the installation of solar panels 3 days before they caught fire. And let me remind you that Los Gallardos also appeared in the official state Gazette of Spain, all right? And what about it? Since the 25th of April, they've been a bit more restrained when it comes to lying. They've been a bit slow this time. They had already published back in April 2023 the prior administrative authorization for the La Rambla photovoltaic installation with a capacity of 89,000 megawatts. Where? In Los Gallardos, Almeria. You see, in some regions, the Popular Party is in power. In others, it's the Socialist Party. And even if it were Podemos or Vox, it's still backed by the government. You can see the teetocracy or the false democracy at play. No, the teetocracy in this sense. And behind Sanchez's backing is the European Commission and Ursula von der Leyen. They're going to sweep everything away, everything around us, everything that is the result of creation, of order. They're going to sweep it all away. And pay attention to this question or this reflection. You, as human beings, are the result of creation. They're going to try to sweep you away too. You already know how as well. And in fact, they're already doing it. They're going to create suffocating conditions for you, especially economic enslavement, pressure at every level, generating climates of terror, panic, fear, just as we see all the time. Watching the news is like exposing yourself to a ticking time bomb for anyone who sees it. That's why we've often talked about the emotional management we need to practice, especially in these times. Are you aware that we are living through the final moments of our civilization? I mean, as the human species, this will carry on. But before long, if it isn't already the case, there will be a percentage of those transhumans, which isn't exactly the fusion of man and machine, where there will be more of them than of us. And we're probably very close to that number. Before, they were still relatively isolated. They could be singled out and couldn't do what they do now with such shamelessness. Now, in addition to the simple fact that they possess the advanced technological capabilities for their exponential growth, you say it, there are still people who say, but how is it possible that they don't go out into the streets? Remember us saying, mate, people are dying, see what's happening? They just say, no. Oh, yes, yes. And the next day, they'd turn up with a third jab, and by the fourth time you saw them, they were either at the funeral parlour or in a wheelchair. Do you know why that happens? Some people here still aren't aware of it. Do you know why you notice that glassy look in their eyes? That empty, hollow look, like a bin. Isn't that right? I bet you don't know, do you? Or is it that you don't want to believe it? There are people who simply don't want to believe it. Those people have already lost all sense of identity and autonomy. Trends like the Thorian, wokeism, and so on are here to break down human identity and autonomy, so you don't even really know what you are. And all of that is going to create the conditions for hybridization. The real hybridization is of nature and intelligence. It's not a genetic hybridization. If anything, that would just be a consequence. And there are still plenty of people who haven't realized this yet. Despite everything, eh? They haven't realized, and they're going to be filtered out. I'll say it again, they're going to be filtered out. Creation does not appear to be particularly interested in non-human beings who aren't capable of possessing at least 3 fundamental and essential key attributes: discernment, a firm moral attitude, intelligence, of course, the vital development of intuition, which you can certainly include here, and, of course, your consistent long-term attitude maintained steadily over time. It is about maintaining a clear attitude and having strong principles. It's as simple as that. That's what sets us apart from other species, believe it or not. If in other species we see in nature that filtering every day is at the level of developing physical skills or abilities, from a physical, physiological, or biological point of view, what characterizes human beings and sets them apart from other species is morality, ethics. What do we do with our attitude, with our way of life carried on over time? You only have one chance. Forget about reincarnations and all that rubbish. You have a single chance to pass the exam, and the exam is called life. And the exam, right? Its difficulty, which is now getting harder and harder, is the pressure that the E factor puts on the species. Do we understand? Do we understand that creation lets the E factor loose to put pressure on its own work, the human species? Is this so hard to understand? Reflect. Think about it. Not with your daemon, but with yourselves. Reflect. Meditate. You'll see how you come to the same conclusion. Let's carry on. You followed the news, the BOE publications, then the fires, or perhaps the fires, then the BOE reports. This is obvious. It's shameless, isn't it? And someone will say, so what do we do? Well, at the very least, report it. I'm reporting it from here. Don't keep quiet. Talk to people, even if it's just for half a second. This is shameless. They were forecasted, and they show you the screenshot from the BOE, and from the other one, and from Almeria and Huelva, in Cerro de Andévalo, and from Zaragoza and Guadalajara, and all the ones that are going to happen, and in the Dana in Valencia, where they open the floodgates. And the ones we won't know about, but we can already imagine them. Well, we just have to put up with all that. Here, in this case, the president of the autonomous community. Last time we said Juanma Moreno from the PP, but as you can see, everything is a lie. Now we see Garcia Page. He was the socialist one, eh? Now, not the ideal socialist, but the one who actually put things in their place for Pedro Sanchez.
He makes light of climate change, of environmental difficulties, of the crisis we're living through. There are fires, but there are many others as well. Anybody makes light of that, it doesn't...
I mean, and Danas.
They just, no, they brush it aside. Those who outright deny it, honestly, believe me, these aren't just speeches. They're legitimate, but they're dangerous. They're part of the fuel for the filers. You can't make light of it. For us, for a long time now, and for anyone who takes it seriously, climate change isn't a choice. Fighting climate change isn't a choice. There are no options. Either you fight for a sustainable world or you're making it unsustainable.
Honestly, come on. You see what I mean, don't you? Just look at what we humans have to put up with on top of everything else. In other words, they set fires according to the needs the administration itself has for installing solar panels, and all of this comes from Europe. The proof is in the official state gazette. And now with their hand raised, those who make light of climate change, and here they get a boost, especially from their voters who will defend them. If you can't hear them, Yvonne, neither can I. We put them here so that you are aware of the world we live in. It's just that this isn't an isolated case, lost among the issue of fires. No, it's that when it's not fires, it's the DAAs. When it's not the DAAs, it's earthquakes. When it's not what happened in La Palma, it's just we're fed up, Hal. When it's not what happened since 2020 up to now, and things just keep going on. Now it's Pico Rivera, who's had a stroke. Not just a stroke, it's his second one, as far as we know, and a heart attack in your knee. And this is the one who used to laugh. Now I'm connected to 5G. You lot will remember him, that you're going to take away Rossini's title of idiot and fool, Pico. Now you're going to take the title away from the other one as well. And this one turns up, and now a neurologist appears on TV talking about the causes and whether stress could have triggered it, and making all of this seem normal, saying that since there hasn't been much damage, everything can get back on track, back to normal, in just a few days. Of course, no, there hasn't been any complication, because it wasn't a hemorrhagic stroke that burst any major arteries, for example, right? Vertebral arteries, for example, or the subclavian. Goodness me, what we have to put up with, And in these videos, I'll show you a few more. There's the one about the autonomous community and the boss. These are the infernal hierarchies. We've got them here as well, in this case already intertwined.
People who question the climate emergency and the seriousness that science brings us every year about the extreme situation of the climate all over the world, because we're seeing huge fires everywhere. In Canada, earlier, the president was referring precisely to that World Cup final in New York City. In New York City itself, the smoke coming from the huge fires in Canada was suffered by the citizens of that American city. And therefore, this is a phenomenon that is affecting all countries.
It's a global phenomenon, like the pandemic, which was global. And someone will say, but how can they all agree? Bloody hell, it's because they're all run by the same person. Haven't you realised yet? There are people here who still haven't got it into their heads that they're all run by the same person, especially for the newcomers. And who is it that runs the world? Who is it? Can any of you say it here? Who is the owner and the one par excellence, eh? The origin of chaos. No one even dares to write it. Well, exposing him is actually one of the few things that really hurts him. The creature, the truly evil one, right, the one who's there at the end. That one. No matter how much it might sound to you, we also have the role of the media. There aren't any, I call them media, so you know what I'm talking about. They're not media, they're mouthpieces for the beast, eh?
We knew it. There are still 9 days left in July, and ALR...
And already, eh? And the little hexagon is in there. Soon they'll put horns on it. They'll stick 2 horns on the hexagon. Just you wait. That we knew it. Or what did we know? We knew what you were going to do. Not that there would be fires, because you were going to set them.
More has burned than had burned by this time last year. And last year was tragic, the worst in history. We're in a state of total emergency. Spain is burning again, and this isn't just a figure of speech, it's literal. The flames are devastating the forests. We're seeing it today in Guadalajara. There are 2 active fires there. The same scene in Almeria just a few days ago. Let's remember, 13 people died. Take a look at this fact. The force of the...
Not that they died, but that you killed 13 people. You as well, with the arguments you're putting forward here. What do you mean we knew? We knew because it was planned in the We knew so well, miss, if I can call you that it was forecast and planned down to the last detail in the official state bulletin. Are you trying to fool? But really, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to drive people with a bit of common sense mad? Or what is this about? That too. This is absolutely disgusting. This is terrible. Terrible. Despicable. No, I can't think of anything else to say. And then the so-called experts show up, don't they? Long hair with a short fringe.
We can define climate change as the greatest mass violation of rights.
Notice anything odd about this lady's face? Do you see anything strange in her eyes? I bet you haven't noticed, have you? Are you able to recognize these people yet, or not? Do you think that when we were talking here, both Jose Luis and myself now, and I suppose him as well, about all these kinds of traits, that's all, even if they might not seem important, and the real importance lies in the attitude maintained over time, because you can probably imagine what this lady does for a living, for want of a better word. Did you think we talk about these things by chance? This is a symptom, an identifying mark of these people, this scum. This chaotic scum. They are hybrids, hybridized, and they play their part, which is to generate chaos. Generating chaos isn't always about setting things on fire directly or destroying things outright. This is another way of destroying by spreading disinformation. They promote them to new roles, reward them for their work, honor them publicly as experts, and put them in high-ranking positions. Where are they going to put me? They put me at the bottom of the Kyle. So where exactly do they put me? You want to have a search for my name on Google. The graphene denier, the graphene cult. Carolina from Psychologists Without Borders saying this is a cult. A report to the National Securities Market Commission to get La Quinta Columna removed. Look, what I'm saying here about the fires, you're all talking about climate change, but these things were appearing in the official state gazette up to 3 days before. And there are still some who trust in the justice system. And I'm going to talk about a commendable job like the one we've done, pioneeringly, which is reporting the injectables, specifically the case of Lorena Di Blasi and Marcela Sangoris. Look at how they've ended up, which is actually the best thing that could have happened to them. Not only censored, vilified, ignored by the justice system, but the justice system actually punishes them. If you go against the beast's agenda, you are punished. If you side with the beast, like this young lady, who isn't a lady but a creature, you are rewarded.
Humans in history. It affects the right to life, education, housing, and health.
Oh, you see anything odd about her face, honestly? Do you see anything strange in her eyes? Well, now you know how you should treat those people. The truth is, the further away, the better.
Rights that are threatened not only by heat waves, but if we think about floods, fires, droughts, they directly affect people's rights.
Fires that someone sets deliberately. Droughts, see? There's the ability to alter the climate, whether you want to believe it or not. And the floods, at least here in Spain, you've been far too blatant. But open the floodgates of the dams. With testimonies from local officials as well. Carries passengers. The 8th passenger, like in the film Alien, eh? Everything happens for a reason, just like in their films too. Yes, soon enough it'll get its claws on you, how?
But also to people's way of life. How do we prepare the welfare state, for example?
But the welfare state says, what welfare state? The state of what?
To respond in a quick and flexible way to situations. For example, with the
is always going to pop out because the creature could burst out at any moment.
Fires like Dana, a devastating drought where people lose their way of life. That's why the
No, that make them lose their way of life.
welfare state needs to step in quick hitter.
You know what the welfare state is, don't you? They're going to put you in a 15-minute smart city. That's the welfare state they're going to propose. It's unbelievable. At the very least, we need to keep our sense of humour switched on a bit, because otherwise this just isn't bearable. If it weren't for the fact that people are dying and they're wrecking lives and destroying the lives of so many people on such a scale and with such a capacity for mass destruction, never has the phrase been more apt.
To protect, to respond, and as I say, right now, the welfare state isn't prepared for this contingency, which I think is one of the most urgent, the most novel, and the one that's going to have the greatest impact on people's lives. I think here it's being done little by little, tentatively, but I believe it needs to be incorporated into its most fundamental core, so to speak.
Well, you've heard her, haven't you? So I'm not going to show any more videos about all this because, well, the only thing I'd achieve is to give stomach cramps to those who are watching this material. Because this kind of situation we're experiencing, especially in the last 6 or 7 years, they couldn't have done this in the 70s or 80s. Back then, not yet. In the past, people still had a good deal of common sense, and they've quite openly made a conscious effort to dumb down people, especially the younger generations of today. There's a kind of social engineering behind all of this. We're going to dive right into the forbidden zone now, so let's get started and talk about another topic which, even if some of you might think it's not interesting, is actually the origin, right? Or one of them. In this case, we talk about one of the typical masks of the factoner, the imaginary friend or the invisible friend. But be aware that what we're about to see now is the origin of everything you've seen before. On the Quinta Columna, we make the connection between that apparent world of mystery, which really isn't a mystery at all, and everything that's happening now. We're going to put up the Forbidden Zone screen and we'll see you just behind it. See you in a moment. Before we dive right into the topic we've titled The Mask of the Imaginary Friend, another of the masks used by that factor, right? Especially with children. I'm going to respond to someone who's commented here. Jamie Doe, you said it's fear precisely that they feed on. They don't feed on fear. It's not an energetic nourishment. Emotions have a vibration, especially negative emotions, like they've introduced in their films such as Monsters Inc. the concept of an energy battery, alluding to the idea that human emotions can be a source of nourishment. Nourishment, from an energetic point of view, exists on the animal scale. They introduce that concept because they know we're going to latch onto it. Energetic parasitism might perhaps occur at some lower levels or lower hierarchies of the E factor, but it's not fear as an emotion or vibration that they feed on. These entities introduce negative emotions on a global scale because they significantly lower the individual's frequency level and render them more compatible or suitable for the process of hybridization with them. Do we understand this? Let's begin today with a program. We're going to watch a comprehensive series of different videos and testimonials, and you'll notice that many times these testimonials will have some flaws in the sense that the imaginary friend seems to create a bit of chaos, frequently results in a significant amount of chaos, and actually seems to resemble something quite different, that emotional lack which isn't explained to us from a scientific point of view. So two things happen. To begin with, on the one hand, the world of mystery appears with Iker Jimenez's program, which you might have already seen in the post we made, due to the platform's censorship for copyright on YouTube on La Quinta Columna's Telegram channel. And the mystery continues to be given that air of mystery, but that's where it's left. No further explanation is ever actually given. And then orthodox scientific thinking appears, in other words, their science, to cover it all up and conceal everything. We have many examples of this. In every field, the E factor is hidden. For example, when we talk about Socrates' daemon in the field of philosophy, when we talk about Jung's shadow in the field of psychology, when we talk about the superconsciousness of Dr. Manuel Sanz Segarra in the field of neuropsychiatry, they are covering up both its obvious presence and the manifestations specific to the E factor. Anything that in any way affects them or points directly at them is systematically concealed by the system they control. That means that everything you're going to see today is yet more proof that this creature controls our entire civilization. Obviously, there are hierarchies. We're going to watch a series of videos and you'll see all these patterns. Let's start with the first one. The imaginary friend. We're going to watch the testimony and listen to it. I'll necessarily have to pause a few times, all right? So as not to lose the thread of the video's conversation, and I'm well aware that some of you tell me, just play the whole video, but I have to make notes, and I've already got more than enough work on my plate, you know. This is essential work you should also be individually, individually, at least taking the time to reflect on it, now that you have much clearer and more refined material here.
Are your children's imaginary friends so cursed that they could actually make them disappear? Listen to this story. This story is shared by Lewis. Let's suppose he's the young man looking out through the window there. He was the older brother, and he says that his little brother, Jamie, was a restless, playful child suddenly there.
And you really have to have that creepy doll on top of it all? Can't you talk any other way? Come on, May. I've got a microscope behind me.
He was even naughtier than usual, and it quite seriously started to catch his attention, because this boy, well, he only started having these conversations when he was playing quietly on his own. And Lewis says that suddenly, well, the boy was there, his brother was playing, running around with a dog, sometimes with his dolls, his toy cars, and then he reached this stage where he would suddenly hear his brother Jaime talking and laughing. He says that he peeked in and saw his brother laughing, that he was playing with some dolls.
It's not just a doll, you know. It's the dark clothing, the tattoos. There are many details that reveal the presence of the E factor in an individual. I suppose that many of you are already aware of all this. The Gothic movement, all of that, you already take it into account. Maybe I'm assuming too much.
I laugh because I was a child who played a lot with toys. And he says it struck him because the boy was practically chatting with someone, and he assumed that maybe because he was a bit of a lonely child without peers, he was probably talking to the dog. Besides, Terry was always there by his side. And what happened? Time went by and he mentioned this observation to the boy's parents. He says, "Hey, have you noticed that lately Jamie seems to be talking a lot more, doesn't he, when he's alone in the garden?" He says the mum replied, "Well, yes, but it's normal, really. Sometimes this boy just has a lot of energy, and absolutely nothing happens." That very night, Jamie disappears, and he says they start looking for him, first in the house, then they go out to search the grounds and can't find him. They start asking the neighbours if they've seen him, that he'd gone out and now he's missing. They begin to panic. You know how it is here, unfortunately, in Mexico. You have to wait a certain number of days before you can file a report and have your relatives searched for, right? They go to file the report that the boy, that Jamie, was missing. And when they return home, they find Jamie playing in the garden. And the mum starts crying, hugs him, and so does the dad. Where were you, son? And then they're telling off, "Why do you do this to us?" And then Jamie says, "Well, I've been here playing with my friend, and we were playing hide and seek, but he got tired, and well, here I am." And Lewis says that the boy explained he only played for a little while, and suddenly, for them, almost 2 days had passed. For Jamie, it was just a moment. And after that, nothing like the imaginary friend incident ever happened again.
Let's see. This is a case. It's not exactly something out of this world. Let's watch the next video. The imaginary friend. In this case, what you've just seen is the famous lapse of time, the loss of time. Loss, that is, they've probably lost consciousness for a while. Loss of consciousness. Keep that in mind. Let's look at the second piece.
What do you imagine when a child tells you they have an imaginary friend? Well, I definitely wouldn't imagine something like this. The sister of the boy who uploaded these videos, who is a little girl, was showing him her drawings because they usually draw the family, but she was surprised to see a new member. Her father, her mother, she herself as well, and Steve.
Steve, what a big head you've got. You look like one of the Monsters Inc. lot. Now you understand why they put their little films on, don't you?
Wait, it doesn't end here, because apparently Steve brought a friend along. Margaret's the friend.
How lovely.
First of all, the girl says she doesn't have imaginary friends. They're her best friends, and now there are 2 of them, remember? Oh, hello. Steve. It's him, and she sketched him. Apparently, Steve told the girl that he doesn't like her brother, and that's why she drew him like that, getting rid of him. But not to worry, because Margaret does like him. Well, not exactly like him, more like she tolerates him, which made him feel a bit more at ease. So either this girl has a wild imagination and draws really well, or her best friends are very strange creatures. What do you not think?
I've never managed to draw a Rapunzel with long blonde hair, or a Mafalda. No, with her teeth all out of place, half lizard-like. A Bug's Life. Or Monsters Inc. Isn't that right? You'll see later why Netflix has just released exactly that. This is so common that they try to normalise it. Especially in films aimed at children, obviously, like Disney and so on. About a film we'll look at later. Not the film itself, obviously, just the synopsis and the cover. It's called My Imaginary Friend, or My Imaginary Friends. That's what the film is called. They all try to normalise it, like with the Revelation and so on. Let's look at another case.
Oh, imaginary friend. Now you have to tell me, according to the paranormal experience I'm about to read, which a child had, is it
What do you mean, paranormal? Doesn't psychology tell us that this is due to a lack of affection? And that the child imagines a friend in order to express and externalize their emotions, thoughts, and feelings? That's what we told.
a typical imaginary friend, just a companion, or a real paranormal entity? Here I go. I'm terrified. I think my 2.5-year-old son is able to see ghosts. To start with, we live in a house built in 1710. Some of my more spiritual friends feel that we're not alone here, but they've all said that our house feels warm and welcoming and that it's a friendly presence. I'm writing this in a panic.
Of course, the friendly imaginary friend.
Because I'm home alone tonight, my husband is away, and during our bedtime routine, before we went to bed, I'm pretty sure my 2.5-year-old son saw ghosts. We were in the...
But ghosts or imaginary friends? Let's see which it is.
We were in the bathroom and suddenly he jumped into my arms, terrified, staring at the shower curtain and saying, "Who's coming out of there?" I said to him, "What do you mean?" And he replied, "I'm scared of the people." I answered, trying to stay calm, "What people?" And he replied, "The bad one." But wait. After this, I held him in my arms for quite a while because he didn't want to get down or go out into the hallway. When I asked him why, he replied, "Thank you. I'm too scared of the people on the stairs." Please help me. Tell me, is this a normal age to start saying these things?
First of all, it's not normal.
Lynn!
That's not an imaginary friend, because besides, there are lots of them.
And what's more, they're not good.
No, they're bad.
Yeah.
And imaginary friends are good. Next, we'll look at some news stories. That expert doesn't seem very...
Look, let me tell you something. That house is overcrowded, and only one person pays the rent there.
So they're ghosts.
So I'd take the house and say, "See you later." And if I move to another house and the child keeps seeing rooms...
The problem isn't the house, Nis. And they're not ghosts. Nor that factor. Well, it often takes on the mask of the disembodied as well. All this comes from the Kardecist doctrine of the famous Allan Kardec. Moving forward. Boosted here in Spain by the EPTA group of Sol Blanco Solar. The problem isn't the house, except for certain points of local infestations. The problem is that the imaginary friend, who we already know who it really is, or the mask it adopts here, follows the person, the child. And those of you who have watched the video I've shared of Mr. Hiker Jimenez, to call him something, will undoubtedly have noticed this, because what this man is going to do is cover it up with a whole mystery angle, as you might expect, where
those things happen, I grab the child, take them to the first house,
and lock the door.
But anyway.
And there, in the other house, just like in the case told by those two witnesses on the Quarto Millennio program, the imaginary friend is going to appear again, all right? Let's look at another case. They're getting more and more interesting, you'll see.
This girl spooked the US a few years ago. It was a drawing she made of an imaginary friend that went viral and made people terrified. Let's talk about children's imaginary friends, which is something that really gives people the creeps and is quite unsettling from an adult's point of view. This little girl, who was 3 years old, when asked about the drawing, explained, "This is my imaginary friend, Grateful, and her yellow eyelashes mean she can see in the dark."
They certainly come up with some very original names for a child's imagination.
It can be creepy. She comes to see me at night. Sometimes she scares me, but I always want her to come back. And this is the key, because it's true. And there are loads of real drawings made by children on the internet that, bloody hell, if you're an adult, what the fuck? Of course it throws us off, like, do they see it? Do they not see it? You should know that girls are, in principle, more likely than boys to have imaginary friends.
This is important, and we'll talk about it a bit later, all right?
Percentages are the same when they start school. They're also more common among firstborns. Younger siblings get them less.
That's an interesting fact.
They usually last for several months and then disappear. This girl says that despite the fear, she always wants it to come back.
That they disappear or that they merge with a child.
Because this is an essential difference. Imaginary friends for children, they aren't frightening or uneasy. There's been talk lately about imaginary friends as seen in the series Eric.
Obviously, they have to earn their trust.
With Benedict Cumberbatch on Netflix, this character hardly brings any well-being. You'd suspect a psychotic origin. Seen the series? It'd be interesting to know the prevalence of this phenomenon in adults, like Kurt Cobain.
Well, the prevalence of this phenomenon in adults ends up being something like schizophrenia, for example, where they also see faces that follow them and so on. Here, perhaps, they're more chaotic.
He wrote his farewell letter to the world to his imaginary friend. I wonder if there are adults who still have...
Surely the imaginary friend had a lot to do with him taking his own life.
And they're imaginary friends, just like there are people who still sleep with cuddly toys. Look, this isn't something you'd usually tell people. So, mums and dads, if your son or daughter has an imaginary friend, pay attention to how it makes them feel. If they seem happy, it's likely just a developmental phase. If you've had imaginary friends or still have them, tell us in the comments.
Most likely, it's just a phase. Well, some key points have been mentioned in the video that we'll add to later. The fact that girls are more likely than boys, and the issue of being the firstborn. This is interesting from the point of view of what we've come to call family curses, or labelling it as a family curse. Personally, I think that women, from a hormonal point of view, are more sensitive when it comes to emotional matters. And you know perfectly well, and we've studied it here, that the emotional and sentimental route is a way in through which the process of hybridization can be encouraged. This happens especially to everyone and to all genders in this sense, men and women, when there's a trauma, when someone falls into depression. Some have more physical strength to get through it on their own, while others beg for help or fall into depression, turn to drink. We already know, perhaps, who the factor is that influences this, because once their mind is affected, which is what happens, as we already know, let's watch another video.
From my house, which was from here in the village over there, when I used to go to church,
Well, here it says, it reveals that her son created an imaginary friend inside the house, which he made up and ended up being a demon.
The child would carry in. He would say to me, "Mum, he's gonna climb up." I could feel the weight because I would buckle under it. I would say, "But come here." Until one day...
When he would say that the imaginary friend was going to climb up and she could feel the weight on her back like a rucksack. When we say, "I'm carrying a rucksack on my back," well, maybe from now on we need to rethink the meaning of that phrase.
I'm sleeping, and in a revelation, the Holy Spirit says to me, "Get up." And I get up in the middle of the revelation, and he says to me, "Look into the living room so you can see who your son is playing with." When I saw that demon, that little fledgling, but you had a painting inside your house, so the boy had an imaginary friend whose name he alone would mention, there was nothing innocent about that demon. That's why we have to be careful at home. We have to be careful with the cartoons we allow our children to watch, the things we let our children make up or say. We need to keep an eye out. We need to pay attention to the children. Because at that moment, I saw it as ignorance, and I didn't know it was something real until God showed it to me. How were you able to get that spirit out of your house? When God showed me that, when I saw that demon on my son's head trying to eat my son's head, I woke up and did this to the father of my children. I said to him, "Get up!" And I opened all the doors and all the windows.
And then he left. Let's look at another case. I compared this one to a demon, literally. Let's say this one here. This one's going to make more of an impression on you.
She had an imaginary friend, and no one believed it really existed. All this happened a few years ago. This girl had an imaginary friend. She spent all her time playing with her. The parents didn't find this strange, since their daughter was very shy and didn't have many friends. And they thought that with time, she would stop seeing her imaginary friend and make real friends. But this never happened. The years went by and her daughter's only friend was still her imaginary friend. That's when they started to worry, and they took her to psychologists to help her make more friends. But everything got worse. She started to misbehave and began doing things.
I mean, when they go to the psychologist, she starts acting up, probably instigated by the presence of that imaginary friend.
Horrible things, things she would never normally do. They asked the girl why she was doing this. And she told them it was because her imaginary friends said that if she didn't do these things, she would disappear and she'd never see her again. Her parents, angry and fed up with all this, tried everything to get her to stop talking to her imaginary friend. But one day, the girl disappeared and was never heard from again. To this day, several children claim that they saw her as their imaginary friend. And this is a photo that was taken of that girl, where sometime later they realised that the person next to her was identical to the drawing she had made of her imaginary friend. And tell me, have you ever had imaginary friends? Go on, tell us.
Blimey, let's see the photo. Crikey. No wonder they drew it like that afterwards. That showed up in the photo. Well, it seems imaginary friends also show up in photos now, at least in some of them. Let's have a look at this one here.
You go to a McDonald's with your little girl, and this is something you end up finding with her. It's not about any boy or girl. It's about something that no longer belongs to this world. Something that's there causing accidents. Isn't it, Ace?
She told us that more often than not, when she has a particularly demanding workload, she makes a conscious effort to take a moment to spend some quality time with her daughter. What they do is go to eat at this restaurant. A little girl is very happy with her little box, with the games. And as there's internet, she can sit down and carry on working in a much more relaxed environment than being in her office. She says the little girl ate and asked for permission to go and play. So she took her things and sat somewhere close to where the play area was. A little while later, she noticed that a family arrived. There was a dad, a mum and two dolls. One girl was about 8 years old and the other a bit younger, about the same age as her daughter. She seemed like a sad girl, sort of switched off, with eyes that looked a bit lost. As if she wasn't paying attention to what was going on around her. By a twist of fate, or destiny I suppose, Anna and this girl clicked straight away.
With that lost look in her eyes.
So they started playing together and they were, in quotes, happy, when suddenly she started to hear that the shouts, which had been shouts of joy among the children, began to turn into screams of terror. When she looked up, at that moment, they saw how the girl who was with them fell to the ground, crashed onto the floor and split her head open. There was loads of blood, loads of that red liquid that's in your veins, spilled everywhere. And when she looks up, she sees Karen, Anna, her daughter, and how the boy who was with them jumps towards the balls, towards the ball pit. At that moment, Karen's mum grabs her eldest daughter by the arm, really forcefully, and says, "Who was it?" And the eldest daughter turns around and says, "Mum, you know who it was."
You know who it was? This case appeared in magazines and in the regular press, not necessarily specialist publications like this one here. A photo of a girl with a supposed imaginary friend, which you can see here on the left, is causing terror on social media. Can't you see it? The creature, that blackish, pale, ashen colour always appears. Cemetery. The ashen palette. That they've been using in films lately. Isn't that right? There's another one around here that we're going to look at now. So what we're going to look at now? Let's see. Yes, this one's really good, because you'll see that the imaginary friend doesn't just appear sometimes on camera, but is also involved. It acts, and that interaction is also caught on video. This was also shown in a news report on a national outlet, in this case I think from Chile, with Larry Merlin. The video, his daughter told him she had an imaginary friend and the camera captured a terrifying moment. The little girl is alone in the kitchen when it all happens. She's got a bag of popcorn and some sort of toy or doll case, and at that moment she's pulled. A video was shared on the social network TikTok that has sparked great curiosity among internet users, as a hidden camera supposedly captured the moment a girl interacts with a ghost, or so they say. But wasn't it supposed to be an imaginary friend? According to the video description, these images were recorded after the little girl told her mother she had an imaginary friend. This camera was placed in the kitchen of the house and managed to show that the girl didn't just have an imaginary friend, but that there could be a paranormal phenomenon in the home. Mate, there's nothing paranormal about it. It's an absolutely normal phenomenon, and it's the presence of these creatures among us, especially near children. Later on, I'll give you a brief explanation as to why it happens with children. Apart from normalizing their presence, due to the fact that children haven't yet formed their identity, it's a way for them to enter their lives and facilitate the process of hybridization. Let's watch the video, which we've edited in a larger format so you can all see it. This is the video here. Blimey, it looked like it was about to take her popcorn away. The truth is, if she's a little girl of about 3 years old, she acts very well or has done a great job. Let's see. I'll play it again. Let's see. It also wants to take a suitcase away. This is interesting. Just how far can they manifest themselves in order to interact with matter in that way? Now, let's watch another video. Obviously, we've seen this, some testimonies, you've seen the world of mystery. What does it do? Well, it delves into the mystery with Mr. Iker Jabin. Yes, he just leaves everything up in the air, muddles it all up, but in reality, he doesn't actually say anything. And then what happens? What appears at the end? The final stumbling block is the science of the two, in this case, in the field of psychology and psychiatry. And what do they tell you? Well, they tell you this. Look here.
She talks to a friend who doesn't exist. Don't worry, it's not always a bad thing. Imaginary friends can appear in the childhood of neurotypical children, but they can also appear in neurodiverse children, although they don't always have the same meaning. In neurotypical children, it's usually part of the development of symbolic play and creativity. In neurodivergent children, it can sometimes be related to difficulties in social communication or interaction. This stage of having an imaginary friend or friends tends to disappear spontaneously between the ages of 5 and 7 without any need for intervention. When could this...
Just because it disappears doesn't mean it's actually gone, you know? It could also mean that it has been integrated. When I talk about integration, I mean fusion, or the integration of one intelligence with another. That is, it has merged with the child or with another family member.
It may be a warning sign if the child isolates themselves and stops interacting with people in the real world, shows intense fear or cannot distinguish between reality and fantasy. And that is
something like schizophrenia, right?
It's clear that you need to observe and support. And if you have any doubts, always consult a specialist.
Well, if we rely on you, we're in trouble. For you to tell us that none of this is bad, that it's not normal. You've said that it doesn't necessarily have to be bad. However, the news we get about all this tends to tell us things like this. A child under 10 who confessed to setting fire to 7 houses, and I mention this because of the topic of fires, at the request of an imaginary friend who also set fire to his own house. Let me give you some background. Another news story. Arroyo Seco, the mother of the boy killed by his sister, said that her daughter blamed her imaginary friend. Honestly, with the way they depict these imaginary friends, with what they do to them, trying to take away the popcorn, the little girl's suitcase, with those sinister faces like ash-coloured masks that appear in photos and in drawings where they look like monsters. They really can't be very good, can they? Let's look at another one. The Lauca attacker said that her imaginary friend ordered her to commit the crime against her classmate. These are different cases, just to give you a few examples. So we're seeing that behind the imaginary friend, what's really there? What there is chaos and destruction, death. That's the imaginary friend. The imaginary friend is just another mask that the factor puts on, in this case in the world of children. In the complex world of adults, it uses camouflage, various psychiatric disorders and syndromes, It adopts the mask of an extraterrestrial being, and it even utilizes the mask of artificial intelligence. It uses the mask of, even if it pains some people, of the Virgin Mary and Marian apparitions. How much work is this going to cost us? Because every time I talk about masks, every time we talk about masks, precisely to unmask, uncover, and expose these people, I end up at odds with people who have been influenced by that particular belief. Do you see what I mean? When I talk about the mask, I'm going to end up at odds with everyone in the world of mysteries who are defending the oncological theme. When I talk about the mask of AI, it's the technology pioneers who take issue. When I talk about the mask of the imaginary child or the mask of the disembodied, it's that group, the spiritualists and the whole New Age lot, who get upset. When I talk about the Marian mask, the Virgin Mary or Marian apparitions, if I start talking about beings of light in general or about saints, I end up clashing with all religious beliefs. But the underlying problem, which neither ufologists nor believers nor the religious etc. understand, regardless of the particular beliefs each of you has or has had, because we all come from somewhere, is that this creature is the one pulling all the strings. And since it controls everything, it is present in all institutions, in every area, in every sub-area, in every facet of reality, because this is its world. And we are its civilization in the sense that we are the potentially inviolable ones, those subjected to tests, those put under examination, and they have the ability to change shape. They have hardly any ability to bind or give cohesion to matter, because their chaotic nature prevents them from doing so. While an ordering nature, based on principles of harmony and frequency, can organize a body, they cannot give cohesion to a body far beyond and only a temporary and partial form. That is precisely why you need to understand that what they are doing is reshaping the planet to create certain habitat conditions which will probably serve them as an interface. This goes much further. Let's move on to another explanation, a psychological one, because this is where the experts appear to cut you off with orthodox science, to tell you, no, don't worry, this is progress. But it's not progress for human beings. Making adequate progress, just like in the old school reports, but for them. In other words, according to their interests, to keep deceiving you, covering things up.
Having imaginary friends in childhood is completely normal. At some point in the past, it was said that it could be.
The first thing they've said is that it's normal. That is, they're normalizing the presence of the factor under the guise of the imaginary friend.
Pathological problem, yet experts say.
Here, look, he's got the white coat on. It's the authority principle at play, the scientist.
Normal. It's very common in childhood, from about 2 or 3 years old, and when thinking matures and becomes a bit more complex, then by 8 or 9 years old, they tend to disappear. It's more common in girls than...
He's going to say it, in girls than in boys.
In boys. It's also more common in only children or firstborns.
In only children or firstborns, surely the conditioning of having a sibling affects the presence of the factor. That's precisely why they want to isolate people. That's why the lockdowns, the stay-at-home orders, as we've said many times. Social conditioning, from the point of view of isolation, shapes the individual in such a way that they become more inward-looking and start having internal conversations which, many times, are not with their own conscience.
But it's not a constant. Children who have imaginary friends, some say they see them, others say they don't see them, but they picture them in their minds, or even if they don't see them, they feel them. The truth is that these imaginary friends allow children to use their imagination, to act out social behaviours before experiencing them, to experiment.
It's that as they're expanding their neural network connections, which we'll talk a bit more about in a moment, why does this happen in children? Well, what you're seeing, I'm not going to show the whole thing, is that they try to explain from a scientific point of view in psychology that there are emotional deficiencies in the child, which often isn't true, because even the parents focus on that aspect, and the child seeks an imaginary friend to express all those feelings that otherwise they can't express because they don't have friends. That is completely untrue, and moreover, the statistics do not support it. In fact, often they have more friends, but they simply have a preference for them because it is precisely the imaginary friend who isolates them, just like a psychopath does, who is a hybrid or already hybridized with a creature inside. And the first thing they do is isolate you from social circles. Why? Well, to work much more effectively on your behavior. The fact that the behavior might disappear close to pre-adolescence, from the point of view of neuroscience, this is what they say. Physiologically speaking, neuroanatomically speaking, brain development reaches its peak phase, not only hormonally, at the culmination of adolescence. That is to say, the quality of neural networks, when it comes to incorporating the learning process based on the individual experiences, the neural or synaptic connections that are formed reach their peak up to that age, up to 8 or 9 years old. Meanwhile, it is very likely that the brain, let's say as it is not yet fully formed, with a development typical of identity, where the individual acquires the concept, the self-concept, and in fact self-esteem, which would be the view one has based on the concept one has of oneself, up until then, let's say the brain is permeable, right? To the entry, of hybridization or to the entry of the factor. That's precisely why they focus on children. And all of this, what makes it more disgusting, because to me it just disgusts me more than anything else, apart from the fact that there are people who can't understand it, is the fact that they're normalizing it. Look, for example, at this work.
Today, I'm here to recommend to you An Imaginary Friend by Matthew Dix. And it's not so...
It's a little book for children, Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend. Ah, lovely. What a good read. It's no longer the reading of The Famous Five or Robinson Crusoe or Don Quixote or Let Go of the Balloon or Roulotte, a machine of space and time. No. Now, what you have to read from a child's point of view is Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend. And since they direct and control the world, well, this book will sell, go viral and spread throughout the population.
It's not narrated by the child, but by his imaginary friend.
And what's more, it's the imaginary friend who narrates the book, not the child. Look, just like Allan Kardec's The Spirits book, which is narrated by the spirits. In that right, Soul, Blanco Soul? The dark, and it gives an entire doctrine, the Kardecist doctrine, from the 19th century, the mid-19th century, right up to today. It's spiritualism, and it's the spirits of our deceased who are speaking to us there to tell lies. It's the factor now disguised as a disincarnate being, and it appears as, say, your father when he was 40, in the best physical shape of his life.
Everything changes because Budo, the imaginary friend, doesn't just see Max, he sees everything happening around him.
Yeah.
To the adults who don't.
They notice, don't they? They're aware of everything around them. They know everything. He doesn't just see the child, he sees it all.
They understand the children who see him as odd.
Of course.
And a world that's clearly not made for him.
Right? No, it's just that this world isn't made for me. I'm the imaginary friend. We'll do what we can to terraform it, some might say, right? Well, in fact, that's what they're doing, trying to normalise all of it, to normalise everything. Later, they're going to watch the film that was made. What's the name of the 2026 film? Imaginary Friends. Of course. There are lots of people who are busy with their lives and don't realise what's going on. But since they're the ones running the world, they hear the childish background music, you know? Look.
Max is a boy who lives very much in his own world. They never label him, but if you know a bit about neurodivergence, you'll...
Neurodivergence? What's neurodivergent? Here we go with the terminology again.
To know what I'm talking about. And that makes the story even more interesting, because it's not about fixing Max, it's about something much more subtle, about supporting him.
It's about supporting him, is it? The imaginary friend isn't... No, he's not going to fix Max. What he's going to do is be there for him. He wants to be there, present.
While he learns to navigate the world in his own way. And this is where Budo's role, his imaginary friend, becomes incredible.
Amen.
Because imaginary friends aren't just there to play, Their mission is much more important, much bigger. They're there for as long as they're needed. And that's it. And I won't say any more, but I will leave you with this. Sometimes supporting someone isn't about saving them, it's about trusting that they can do it themselves. And this book shows it in a way you definitely won't forget. It's not a book about imaginary friends, it's a book about what it really means to support someone and about knowing when to stop doing so.
She's really selling it well, isn't she? Well, to top it all off properly, and just so that you can get a much better idea of exactly how far all of this actually goes, have a look at the upcoming film on Netflix, Imaginary Friends. What does it look like? You see the little monster, the purple one with the teeth. Who does it look like? Hasn't a little girl drawn something similar before? Huh? What an imagination that girl had who drew it. What was her name? Margaret. The name of the picture. Imaginary friend. The chainsaw teeth. Exactly. How curious, isn't it? The synopsis tells us it follows a girl who goes through a difficult experience and then starts to see everyone's imaginary friends who have been left behind when their real life friends have grown up. The imaginary friend. You see, smiling. It's a monster, but a smiling one. And all of this, which we've introduced in the Forbidden Zone and apparently seems to belong to the world of mystery, unfortunately is no mystery at all. This is not just about attempts to normalize it in their world, which is ours apparently, in their films, in their culture, in their books, as you've seen, in their science, in their psychology, in the realm of mystery, as Mr. Jimenez does. This is present in everyday life. It's very unusual for you to talk to those around you and not find people who have had that experience. Half the time, if not most of the time, it ends up in a chaotic situation, you know? It ends badly. They have a really tough time, especially the parents. They see shadows, poltergeists, as Sol Blanco Sola would tell us. Those are the dead and the teenager in the family who has a lot of energy and is the one projecting all that, so things move and all that. These people, I was going to say, I could send them a message from here, but I think they're more than aware of what we're saying. And they're not going to react to the message, not just because they're making a living from this, and obviously the factor of hiding and disguising things, which is exactly what they're doing. And I'm talking about a lot of people. In the ufology field, you know who they are. In the field of AI, in the field of the disembodied, Sol Blanco Solar, and so on, just to mention a few. These people are part of the whole thing, in the sense that they've already got the bug inside them. That's the problem, and that's what you need to understand. They've got the bug inside them. And since they've got it inside them, it's the bug that takes control, that grabs the bull by the horns. And the bull, in this case, is the likes of Benitez in the ufology field, or in the field of the dead, it's Sol Blanco Soler, and so on. And it keeps going. It keeps using them, quite literally, making them lose their autonomy in order to impose the narrative that allows them to hide from our world. We'll leave it here so as not to drag this out any further. We'll talk about some other mask. And as I said, I'll leave all this documented in written form. And with especially clear and understandable language, even if we use certain terms to make it easier for everyone to understand. You'll see how quickly you all understand the real world you're living in and, most importantly, what mission we have here as human beings. I would like to wish all of you a very good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you again this weekend, most likely on Sunday. Good night to everyone, and have a restful night.
Grandeza, gloria, victoria, coraje, lealtad, justicia, nobleza, destino, verdad. Es la hora de luchar.
Empower translations. Translations for all humanity.